Hey, how you doing? My name is Jordan Hawthorne. I am joined, as always, by the marvelous and wonderful Will Goodwin. Find him on Twitter at WillBadLose and check out his Bad Loser blog. We've gotten half of the plugs out of the way. I'll do the other ones later in this show. The Vikings start off a little rough, losing 20-17 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In a game that unfortunately feels like the Vikings handed to the other team. It felt like, let me just try to pluck an analogy out of the air here. It felt like the Vikings were going to hand off the football, and the Buccaneers were, let's call him an Ed Ingram, who just punched the W out of the Vikings' hands and forced a fumble, and everything kind of went downhill from there. I think we'll get into the defense, the offense. We'll get into just about everything. Can we both agree? Greg Joseph, good job. Made all of his kicks. Didn't look too bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Greg Joseph was the player of the game. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately that seems to be it. Just I'm trying to think of the words to say. I'm trying to think of where to start because I hate starting these things off super duper negative and all pissed off and doing that. But I'm unfortunately I think we have to start off a little negative and a little pissed off. I went on a huge spiel. I posted it to my TikTok with the final countdown playing in the background about how if Ed Ingram and Ezra Cleveland and Garrett Bradbury, if they could play their hind ends off for one season, this team could go to the Super Bowl and win it all. And I said they would play their hind ends off. They would win it all. Ed Ingram looked bad. He's back to the same old tricks. He had 2 sacks last season, which I think is a career high for an offensive lineman. And now he has a strip sack to start this year off. I mean, he's got to go. I hate to say that. He's got to go. Am I crazy? Am I overreacting? After 19 games now of Ed Ingram looking bad, can we agree that Ed Ingram needs to go? We need to bring in a guy like Dalton Reisner or somebody like that.
Yeah, it's definitely not encouraging to see what Ed Ingram did yesterday. I think the strip sack, although, I mean, it's hard to know whose fault it is, frankly. You could blame it on Kirk for not tucking the ball sooner. O'Connell kind of described it as a fluky thing, and I think it kind of is. I mean, how often does a guard pull? Quite often. And how often does a quarterback take a snap and then proceed to pitch the ball? Quite often. Those things happen in tandem quite often. So I think the idea that, that play alone was a fireable offense is hyperbole, but his game was not good. He continues to be a weak link on the offensive line. I think, as a whole, the unit did not run block terribly well. You could kind of tell. I mean, in a tight game like that, you like to be able to have, as O'Connell likes to say, the marriage of the run and the pass. And it was basically just the pass. Madison, I thought, ran very aggressively and ferociously, frankly. But he didn't have many holes, didn't have many running lanes. His effort was good. That touchdown especially was fantastic. And that was actually on a reception, but it was just not. It was not a clean performance by the offensive line, and Ed Ingram is right in the middle of that. I think he had the worst pass blocking grade of any of the offensive linemen yesterday from PFF. One of my friends, shout out to Thomas Moats, he even just said, like, why don't we just go get, bring somebody in just to make sure Ed knows his job isn't safe.
Yeah.
At the very least, and I don't hate the idea. I think, if we're thinking about Thursday, which is very soon, the Vikings basically have 2 days of preparation, a flight to Philadelphia, and then you play the Eagles. You're probably not going to play somebody else on Thursday night. I think that'd be frankly foolish.
Yeah.
But if Thursday, and I'll say even sort of I can get to that in a bit, I guess, in terms of how I feel about this entire game and the how it impacts my thoughts on the season as a whole. But if the trend of Ed Ingram struggling continues, then a change needs to at least be strongly considered. One game is not enough to blow it up, and one game should not be cause to blow anything up, whether it's the line or anything on defense or whatever. But if the trend continues, then you need to take a longer and harder look at it.
Yeah, I think the idea of Greg Josephing Ed Ingram to me is frankly not enough. And I'm not trying to hammer the guy. I wish him the best, and he kind of seems like he would be a pretty good backup guard to have, in the bag. Sure. But look, man, like at some point you have to make a decision as a team on whether you want to win a championship and have like a legitimate shot, or if you don't. And you don't if you're playing Ed Ingram out there. He's, I think last year he was the worst right guard in football. Yeah. Just point blank. Just, PFF grades, eye test.
I don't think that's even hyperbole. I think that's
he was
accurate.
Whether it was, I think he was all right in the run game. But I don't think the Vikings ran the ball that effectively last season to consider it like this. Okay, well, that's why we're keeping him. And I'm going to quickly, and I want to get your thoughts on this because I do want to talk about who do we blame for losing a winnable week 1 game where you have had 26 weeks-ish to get ready for this game against Tampa Bay, and you show up and you don't look great. I'm going with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah because I have multiple thoughts, so let me make sure that I don't stumble over myself. Let me compose myself. The Vikings made a decision in the offseason that they wanted to be physical and they wanted to run the damn ball more effectively than they did in 2022. They go out and they sign Josh Oliver, which is a good sign if you want to run the ball, and then they do like nothing else. They don't improve the interior of the offensive line. They extend their center, who is okay in run blocking in the zone scheme, but is kind of a scrub in pass protection and gets manhandled pretty regularly. So they extend him, and everybody says, okay, maybe they're gearing up to take a guy out in the draft. Maybe they're gearing up to fix it with a rookie. And they didn't take anybody that I can remember and on the offensive line. So you make the decision, we want to be more physical. We don't want to get bullied by the elite defensive lines in the NFL. And then you don't do anything about it besides sign a backup tight end and extend a center, which doesn't count as doing anything. You're keeping the line the same. And so it just, to me, if you're going to make the decision to draft Jordan Addison, you either need to not sign Josh Oliver because that money can be used on a guard to protect your quarterback who will be throwing the ball to Jordan Addison, or you don't draft Jordan Addison and you draft John Michael Schmidt or whatever his name was out of the University of Minnesota, and maybe you take a third-round flyer on a giant road grading, right guard, and you try to make this offensive line one of the best. And so, to me, Dallas isn't on the schedule. Thank God. We'd get beat 92-0 by Dallas right now. Their defensive line would eat us alive, and Kirk Cousins would look like Aaron Rodgers looks on Monday Night Football right now, hobbling around in the locker room in a boot. Kirk Cousins is getting older. I think he's a very good quarterback. I have it on the ticker on the bottom of the screen. Sorry, podcast listeners who won't be able to see that. I have stopped blaming Kirk Cousins for this loss, you bozos, because truly, what is he supposed to do behind Ed Ingram and the rest of the line just playing like absolute crap? And it goes back, and now I'm on a full tangent, and I apologize, but it goes back to this idea that we need to be able to get to the second level in the run game effectively so we can break off runs. No, stop it. Draft 500-pound men that can push other 500-pound men around. And I just don't get it. I don't get this zone scheme. I don't like it. We might be able to get a 7-yard run every 3 plays, but we can't get a 12th in inches if we need it, because our guys are undersized and they suck. They just stink. Our line stinks, and that's where I'll leave it. I blame Kwesi. The roster construction to me, you want to be too many things, and you need to be really good at like two things, and you're not really good at any of them because the interior offensive line is so bad. Who do you blame?
So I'm gonna blame something completely different. The lack of Mustache Monday continuing into week 1. Hence the fact that I brought on the Kirk Cousins handlebar mustache today for Mustache Monday.
You look dashing.
It's completely joking, obviously, but I did bring out the mustache for Mustache Monday today to just try and bring some good vibes back to the team. I think they need it. I mean, frankly, I don't really blame one person, honestly.
That's fine.
I blame all 90 or whatever it is, 53 players and however many coaches and executives, and it's probably more than 90. It was a team effort in terms of sort of, crumbling a little bit. Not that they crumbled under the pressure, but what I saw yesterday, and I noted this early in the game, was a lack of energy and a lack of want to and a lack of aggression. It was very clear early on that TJ Hawkinson was getting, pushed around. He didn't seem as, and I'm just using his as an example, frankly. He wasn't as interested in hitting the guys up front as the guys up front were in hitting him. He seemed lethargic, and I think that was because he, along with much of the team, didn't seem ready to go. Basically, it was Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson who seemed ready. The defense, I thought, played pretty well in the first half. Brian Flores had Baker and company really off kilter for about 2/3 of that first half. But then after that, it just kind of felt like we were the ones getting punched in the mouth. And that continued throughout the game. I mean, Levante David was bringing the hurt to the Vikings, it seemed, every play. And even like a little bit of extracurriculars where he would, drive somebody into the turf and things that you don't really love to see, because I think those are the types of plays that could frankly injure somebody. There was a play where he tackled Cousins and sort of drove his helmet into the ground. Things that you don't love to see just as like a fan of like, all right, that level of aggression is probably not necessary, but at the same time, it was indicative of where the Bucs were in terms of wanting that game compared to the Vikings. And so I think it was sort of a collective collapse in that way. And even Justin Jefferson, who was fantastic for the first half of that game, the lack of possessions in the second half and the lack of opportunities really hurt his ability to continue to affect the game. But I felt that he could have showed a little bit more leadership in the way that he conducted himself. He's got a C on his chest now. That can't just be a symbolic thing because he's the best player on the team. It also has to be an effort in which to lead your guys into battle and with adversity. And it was clear that he was not, he did not respond well to the adversity in terms of his emotions. I did not appreciate the blindside tackle on the interception. I thought that was just very, just kind of, I don't know,
Diva-ish?
tasteless. Like you didn't need to do that. Just tackle the guy. Don't try and take his and your own head off.
Yeah.
I didn't
go for the ball because he has no idea that you're coming.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect opportunity to it was Danslow last year in the Bales game, which I know he's a defensive player. But Danslow was kind of out of the play. Lucivo didn't know he was coming. Came in, took the ball from him really quick. I had no idea it happened, and it ended up winning us a game. you had an opportunity to steal a possession, and instead you got, pissed and you laid somebody out, which, like, cool. I'm sure, there are some people that love that. They love the hit, but,
Yeah.
I go for the ball. What are we doing?
Yeah, I also don't like my franchise player throwing his head in a tackle after an interception.
For sure.
Nor did I like the pouting on the bench after the game. Like, I understand he's a competitor. I understand he's pissed. I understand all that. But the way in which Kirk Cousins handled that, the end of that game, and like, you could tell Kirk Cousins was about as angry as, anybody else on the sideline. And, you could tell by the terse lips and the furrowed brow as he walked to midfield to shake hands. It's a little thing, but the little things matter to me. I'm not someone who believes that just, you strap it up and you go play for 60 minutes and that's all that matters. Especially when it comes to leadership. And so, I don't know. I think everybody's to blame. I think it was a sort of, a group effort, if you will. What do you think though about Cousins in general? His play, kind of zeroing back in on that. Sort of a strange game from the quarterback. But what was your assessment? I know, like, it's not like you said. Let's stop blaming Kirk Cousins. But what was your sort of overall take of his game?
I thought he played well. I would, and look, I'm not. I've said it many times. I'm a Madden general manager. I'm a Madden play caller. So I'm not, diving into the X's and O's as much as I would like to, but I would like to see, because it seems like we were getting blitzed a lot and they were bringing pressure a lot on Cousins. And I would have liked to have seen O'Connell kind of change that. I am of the opinion that Kirk Cousins doesn't really have bad games anymore. Kirk Cousins is consistent in what he delivers. It just depends on what Kevin O'Connell puts out there for him to deliver to. And so, like, I think it was a 3rd and 2. The play call was a little quick out to Jordan Addison where he needed to make a very physical and sound Tampa Bay defender. Their defense is good. We talked about it last week. It was what kind of spooked us about this team was they were physical, they were nasty, and they made, it's tough to make a miss. They will make tackles in open field. They will do the can't think of the word, the fundamentals. And so instead of calling, I didn't see one max protect where it was Cousins had a running back blocking, Cousins had 2 tight ends blocking, and it was Jefferson and Addison just going.
I noticed one, and
Was
granted,
there one?
I didn't watch all of the tape or anything like that, but there was one play where it was actually an explosive to Jefferson.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was Ham and Chandler blocking, as well as Josh Oliver, and the only 2 guys running routes were Osborne and Jefferson, and it ended up being a big chunk play down the middle.
And we should
2
have been
guys
calling,
running against. Yeah.
We should have been calling more of that, because if they're going to send pressure and play zone, let Jefferson and let the veteran KJ find holes in the zone. Let, Jordan Addison come in instead of KJ and find a seam in the zone where Cousins can deliver a perfect ball to him.
Yep.
It seemed like Cousins played fine. Cousins played how I would expect Cousins to play in a game where they're blitzing all of the time. We're not adjusting to it. We're not picking it up well. And frankly, I said this about the check down in the playoff game. You can't call that play where your second best receiving option is on a check down. And I'll say it again this week. You can't just go out there and say, we're going to do what we practiced when they are throwing haymakers at you. You have to adjust, and you have to recognize if they're, again, never called plays a single day in my life outside of a game of Madden. But even when my dad, when my brother, when my wife is on the couch watching the game saying, why are they not blocking leaving guys in to block. They're bringing extra defenders. Why aren't we leaving in extra offensive players to block? It just it just didn't make sense. So
Yeah.
I know that was a weird way to answer how did Cousins play,
No,
but
that it's a real sort of response to it, and I think it's an accurate one also just how O'Connell felt about the game as well. In his post game as well as today, two times addressing the media basically in the last, 24 hours, he accounted for the idea that, basically we have to be more prepared for these types of looks. And he also acknowledged that with Philadelphia coming up this week, it's going to be something, not necessarily similar. It's not like they're going to do the exact same thing. But also, like TJ Hawkinson said last night, hey, it's on tape and it worked. So we got to be ready for it.
yep.
And so the idea that, like you said, you can just block with 5 or 6 and expect it to work when they're bringing 6 or 7, you just can't. And so, again, it's another growth opportunity for a young head coach. And I think there were moments in the game yesterday where it was like, okay, great. He saw that and he did a blitz beater with a screen right against it. There was a play, it was a screen to Ty Chandler, and it was like almost the exact perfect call for the pressure that the Tampa Bay brought. Right. It was like a cornerback or a safety blitz off the right edge, and they threw a screen right behind it, and it was perfect. And those are the types of things that, a lot of it's timing, a lot of it's guesswork, but you have to be able to put those tools in Kirk Cousins' tool belt so that if he sees that type of look, he can check to it.
Yeah.
And it's clear that they trust him to do that. And so I don't know. We'll talk about Philadelphia later this week, but I'm very curious to see how the Vikings respond schematically. Like we said, because it's, going to be another good defensive test or offensive against a good defense in Philly. So
we'll talk about this, like you said, later this week. So I don't want to spoil my Philly take quite yet. So I want to give people a reason to tune in. But I do think I at least have a good insight into the Philly game. So make sure that you tune in. Follow that, later this week. But let's talk about something positive, because I do think the defense was a huge positive. We saw them blitzing. We saw Tampa Bay likes to do those little play action bootlegs that the Vikings love to do. They do those as well. Mm-hmm. And I think you saw a lot of free rushers, and it was something that we noticed watching the game. It was every time they handed the ball off, the Vikings had someone that was dedicated to going after the quarterback, which I was eating up. Because it meant that whenever they did try that bootleg, Baker Mayfield had decisions to make. And don't get me wrong, I can nitpick.
He made some good ones.
No, he did. He did play well. People acted like Tampa Bay was tanking to get Caleb Williams.
Absolutely.
And players and coaches don't tank, front offices do. And if you're tanking front office, you don't bring in Baker Mayfield for a quarterback competition, because Baker Mayfield.
No, you let
is a
Kyle
gamer.
Trask just play.
Yeah. You would have said you wouldn't have brought Baker Mayfield in at all. You would have just signed, I don't know, Trevor Siemian or someone, in that realm, and been like, we're gonna see what we have in Kyle Trask. Oh my gosh, we lost a bunch of games. Secretly under your breath, thank God we got a top pick. But that's not what, Baker Mayfield is a competent quarterback. I was super high on him coming out of Oklahoma, and he made some throws and he made some plays that were really good. Nitpicks on the defense, Josh Metellus getting caught flat-footed on that Mike Evans touchdown. Kind of seemed like he thought the ball was going to come sooner than it did. He wanted to make a play on it. Mike Evans just ran behind him and scored a touchdown. There was a play that there was a second touchdown where the Vikings, I believe, brought pressure, and it felt like all of the zones that we were in were on the left side of the field. If you're looking at it from like the offense's perspective, everybody was on the left side. And so they ran a slant or a crosser across to the right side. and none of the zones followed him. We're going to see growing pains like this. This is a very young defense, but the goal is that we make that mistake in week 1 so that in week 15 we don't make those mistakes and we start playing a lot more sound and guys learn from the stuff that they messed up. So I'm personally very enthused by what I saw from the Minnesota defense. Brian Flores bringing heat. Personally, would have liked to have seen him blitz a little bit more on third downs, which I know is like that. We're nitpicking at this point. The defense gave up 20 points, but would have liked to have seen him stop doing that whole, rush 3 and drop 8. Maybe bring pressure on third down. Maybe do that drop 3 on rush 3, drop 8 on like a second down, and try to throw it off a little bit because we'll get there. It was the first game. I'm not gonna assassinate the defense by any means. What do you think?
I mean, well, the obviously the bigger concern was the second half. They gave up 10 points in each half, so it's not that. It's more the inability to get off the field when you needed to. They didn't force a punt in the second half, and that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to win when you only get your offense 3 cracks at it. It's just there's no two ways about it, and it's those sort of things are going to happen when they didn't allow any explosive plays or anything really other than the touchdown to Evans, but what they did not do was just contain rushes and quick game passing, and it was just everything was 5, 6, 7 yards, and it was just sort of like this gradual progression of just sort of like death by 1,000 cuts. And the defense didn't play poorly, but there was no big plays. No big plays by the defense apart from maybe a Danielle Hunter sack. The first half was sort of maybe a different story. And I actually felt, you mentioned Josh Metellus. I actually felt he played well, and I felt he played very spirited.
Yes, so did I.
And was a really good player yesterday. The touchdown obviously wasn't good, but yeah, generally speaking, I felt the defense had this like level of ferocity, and then it just kind of they got sort of pushed backwards. I wouldn't say pushed around, but they got pushed backwards a lot in the second half, and so the inability to stop the bleeding. You can't force one punt against an offense that's not necessarily a world beater. So they're gonna have their work cut out for them with Philadelphia. That's for sure. But maybe we can close this one with just your thoughts, and then I can chime in a little bit too, just on if anything has changed in our approach or our perspective of this team after sort of kind of a shocking sort of start to the season. I think it's fair to say us in terms of fans and also the team probably, expected a win. Not that the team just thought they could roll it out there and walk away with a win, but I think, there aren't many who would have picked the Buccaneers in this game. And so I don't know, does this change your perspective on the team? Whereas, you picked them 12-5, winning the Super Bowl. Like, is your perspective completely changed, or where are you at?
Okay, so let me start by saying I do have to claim that I got something at least a little right. I think Green Bay might go 12-5. They looked pretty good against Chicago. So just
or
really
the Bears
quickly,
are just terrible.
Oh, the Bears are terrible.
Or both.
That's also, hopefully that's what it is, and it's not that Green Bay has Hall of Famer number 3. Come on down. That would really suck. But
that would be brutal.
It would be good for my quarterback take stock because I was very high on Love during that draft.
Were.
But anyway, no, I think it changes the 12-5 prediction to an 11-6, 10-7 prediction. The NFC is weak, and I think that there is a good. I think there's going to be wild card opportunities for this team, guaranteed almost. This team is too talented offensively specifically to not be, they're not going to be in the top 5 draft picks. They're not, if they miss the playoffs, it's going to be by a half game. It's going to be like Detroit missed it last year, where,
Yep.
someone wins and it's like, oh, well, there goes our chances. Oh, it's going to be the last game of the season. We have a shot to make it. And right now, the only thing I'm really questioning is, my Super Bowl, not my Super Bowl take, but this is going to be the best offense in Vikings history take. On paper, I stand by it. Unfortunately, the interior offensive line has to be addressed. So for now, that take is being taken off. That it's not being retracted. It's just being moved to the back burner to cool off for a little bit. We'll see what happens. Dalton Reisner wants to be a Viking. We're not really doing news tonight. Dalton Reisner wants to be a Viking. Someone tweeted, "We need to sign Reisner." Dalton Reisner replied, "I'm ready." Like, he wants to come to Minnesota. So I don't know why we haven't thought about doing that. Like you said, he wouldn't play this week. Hell, he might not play week 3, but it would be really nice to have him week 4, 5, so on. So
Yep.
I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully Garrett Bradbury can come back. He left this game with a back problem, the same back problem
It's
he
not,
had
no
last
good.
year. And Christian Darrisaw dealt with an ankle injury in this game, so hopefully he will be good to go,
Yeah.
and he can bring his A game against what I will assume will be a pretty ferocious Philadelphia pass rush. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my thoughts. This team, maybe it's not guaranteed division winner. Maybe it is more of a wild card team. But I still think they're gonna win some games. We're gonna win some games. We're gonna be fine. I'll just keep telling myself that. But I did wear my Cincinnati gear in protest of the Vikings after that performance yesterday. So, what about you? What are we thinking?
Yeah, one just other quick piece of news, something that I didn't even really notice on the broadcast yesterday. Partly because I had the sound off while I was had my children sitting next to me watching Disney Plus, so they got the sound privileges, so I missed a lot of the injury updates. But Marcus Davenport didn't even play.
Yeah.
I That was something that just completely slipped my mind, and I sort of was like half expecting like where's number 0? That's just not really a number that you miss. It's not like 90 where it kind of blends in. Yeah, he had sort of a late scratch late in the week, got injured in practice, just didn't feel good enough to go. So hopefully, he can roll it out on Thursday. But that was also not helpful. Just I thought the defensive line, defensive front played fine, played well enough, but having Daniil's hopeful running mate there would have helped a lot. This doesn't change a whole lot. I think if we're going to go game by game, I picked the Vikings to win this game. So if you want to, switch it around to 11-6 instead of 12-5, that's fine. But something that I know very well about the NFL is that the games you think you should win, you don't always win, and the games you think you should lose, you don't always lose. The margins for victory are so slim that the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, that's probably a bad example because they're actually trying to lose games. But like the Chicago Bears could go out and beat the 49ers like they did week 1 last year. Like weird things happen in the NFL, and the Vikings went to Buffalo last year in a game that I think everyone outside of the team thought they were going to lose. It was the game that I was most certain they would lose on the schedule. And they ended up winning that game. And so there's a level of weirdness. And so I say all that because yes, I think the Eagles will win on Thursday night, and we'll get to that later this week, but I will not be shocked if the Vikings win on Thursday night. I will also not be shocked if the Vikings beat the Chiefs, who I picked them to lose to. Just like I won't be shocked if the Vikings lose to the Chargers, who I picked them to beat. And so there is just such randomness and tiny, tiny margins for error that can be exploited or you know, you can lose a game by just, sort of like an Ed Ingram left forearm hitting the ball out of Kirk Cousins'
Right.
hand. It's little things like that that lose you a game or win you a game. And so, long way of saying, my perspective on the team has not changed. I still think they will win the division. Um, yes, I still think they'll beat the Lions in the division, who beat, the Super Bowl champs on Thursday night. I'm not out on the team after one game. Now, if this trend continues and they continue to have an inability to protect or continue to have an inability to turn the ball over on defense, if they continue to have an inability to execute in the red zone, sure, then we can start sounding the alarms. But one game cannot be the cause for alarm bells. Internally, the team needs to do some introspection, as O'Connell put it last night. But it's one game. There's still 16 more of them, and so if these trends continue, I will be concerned in terms of a season-long trend. So if they come out and they look no different and look worse on Thursday night, and they lose by 17 like they did last year at Philadelphia, and they lose to the Chargers, then okay, we can start freaking out. But I'm not there yet. It's one game.
Yeah, I think I agree. My final thoughts, very briefly, will be I just got an ESPN update. Aaron Rodgers not coming back into Monday Night Football. They feel he has tore his Achilles, but the x-rays were negative. But this is that medical situation where I don't know if you want x-rays to be positive, as in like a positive outlook, as in he didn't tear his Achilles, or if it's negative, as in, this is a negative situation, he tore his Achilles. So I don't really know, and I tried to find it, and I can't find it. So best wishes to him, man.
Generally a negative x-ray means that nothing is tore or broken or anything like that.
Okay,
But
he's
obviously it's
done.
very it's very I mean, the game is going on right now while we're recording this,
Yeah.
and so
So
it was
developing
like his
situation.
fourth snap as a New York Jet. He got sacked by Leonard Floyd.
So
If
all the best to
he
him.
tears his Achilles, the season's over. I mean,
Yeah, no, there's no doubt.
there's
And so
no two ways
hopefully
about
he
it.
didn't tear his Achilles, and hopefully he doesn't have any
Yeah,
significant damage. Because I
that'd be brutal.
now that he's not a Packer, I can say this will be my final thought. Football is better with Aaron Rodgers playing because like the more good quarterbacks, the
It's true.
better. And so hopefully he's not out because I would rather. It would be fun if the Jets were interesting and not a steaming pile of dog crap.
Yep.
But we'll have to wait and see. So those are my
Yep.
final thoughts. Shop Unified. Follow the show at LTB Vikings, and tune in later this week for Philadelphia preview, which should be fun. And I'll pass it off to you, unless
Yeah.
those were your final thoughts earlier. But
Really no other final thoughts other than just let's relax. Stranger things have happened. This is not. This is not. This is not something to, fire everybody and start over. We get a real quick chance to see what this team's made of. It's. I'm quite interested and also excited just to see how they respond coming next week, which is very soon. 3 nights from now, they'll be kicking it off in Philadelphia. So for Jordan and Will, this is Load the Box. We'll see you not even next week, in a couple days. Skol, y'all.